Hi everyone, welcome to the Laser Channel. I am Greg and this is the Monport 40 watt CO2 laser machine. And in this video, I'm going to go through my top 5 favorite maintenance checks to keep this machine running in tip-top shape. Stay tuned to find out what those are. Welcome back and thank you for tuning in. Before I start, I just want to spend a quick second on safety to make sure that you read and understand all the safety instructions that come with your particular machine. Certain portions of this video, I will be inside of the electrical cabinet briefly. During those times, I do want to make sure that my machine is unplugged from any power sources. Now, with that covered, the 5 main things that I like to check for maintenance on my machine stem from the manual that comes with my machine, particularly in the back of the book related to maintenance. The other thing that I like to apply when doing maintenance is my background with industrial machinery and photography equipment. Now, with that all covered, let's dig into that top 5 list. The top 5 main things that I check on maintenance on my machine, and I've got a little cheat sheet to make sure that I don't skip any, is I'm going to clean and wipe down the machine along with a general inspection. I'm going to change out the water coolant for this machine, followed up by cleaning the machine rails and checking the belt tension and lubricating the rails on this machine where needed. Little tip, not all the rails need to be lubricated. Next up is checking the mirror alignment. Now I'm not going to do a full mirror alignment in this video. That's going to be a whole separate video for that. In this video, just the maintenance check, I'm just going to check that the mirrors are in alignment. And then the very last thing that I'll be checking is cleaning the mirrors on the machine. I'm going to do a quick clean while the mirrors are still installed, and then I'm going to do a deep cleaning on several of the mirrors and the main lens on mirrors that might be really dirty. I'll show you what all of that looks like. Now for wiping down the machine, I'm going to be using a little bit of clean water and these blue paper towels. These can be found at most automotive shops. Some of the cleaners for the mirror will include some acetone, or I like to start out with a type of alcohol. We're going to pretend that this is isopropyl alcohol and not denatured alcohol. To clean those mirrors, we'll need a lens cleaning tissue paper. And here's a close-up of what one type of tissue paper looks like. And what makes this paper very unique is that it has a texture to it and that this does not leave behind lint on any of the lenses or mirrors that you'll be cleaning, and that's going to be key. So there's the tissue paper. Now we need a way to apply the cleaner to the tissue paper or the mirror, and for that I like to use these reusable or disposable eyedroppers. Now I've got one out, but I ended up buying this 50 pack because this whole pack was $6 or $7. So this essentially will be almost a lifetime supply for this machine to keep everything clean. I do recommend getting one of these little photography kits for cleaning lenses. These are typically about $5 to $10 each, and it will contain this little bulb, and you squeeze it and it will puff out a little bit of air, and we want to use this air and not breathing with our breath, because there'll be some little spittle that comes out and that'll actually just get the lens even more dirty. Inside this lens, there's this little lipstick tube, and out of the end comes this little brush. So anything that this piece here can't get off, this light brush can get off. Now I know it's very tempting when you receive this kit to touch those bristles. If you touch them and get your finger oils on this bristle, this is no longer good. It's now contaminated and you can't use it to clean your lenses. There's some other cleaning patches that come with these kits typically. However, I recommend using these other cleaning solvents along with that lens tissue paper. And anytime that we're going to be working around the lenses, we want to make sure that our hand oils stay off of those mirrors. So a fresh clean pair of blue gloves seems to work best. For lubricating the rails inside of the machine, I've got two options that I kind of go to. One is a bicycle chain oil. This seems to work out very well. It goes on wet, it stays wet, and they have a tendency to repel dust and debris. The other go-to one, which is what I use on a lot of my other machines, is this Hoppe's number 9 light oil. This is actually a gun oil, but I like this because it goes on clear, it stays clear, it stays wet over time, it won't dry out or get gummy. For step 1, I like to start out with one of these blue paper towels that I spoke of at the very beginning of the video, and I have it just damp on one end with some clean water, and this is just very basic. I just like to quickly wipe down the machine, getting any dust or anything off of the machine. I always like working around a clean machine. The other thing that this does, if there's something that goes wrong and it starts smoking or creating a lot of debris, a lot of times I can see that right away and stop the machine and see what's wrong. On the inside of the machine, I like to clean off this Lexan glass that's on here, this laser-proof glass, and moving around to different spots of the machine. And I have this back cover removed so that you can easily see it. And again, with that same damp cloth, I want to go through and make sure that any dust that may have built up on the laser tube is cleaned off. We want to make sure that that dust buildup doesn't create any arcing by any of the electrodes to either end of the machine. With the back cleaned up, I'm ready to move inside of the main work area of the machine. This general cleaning is just good housekeeping. I like to keep my workbed area nice and clean, along with this is part of the rails over here. I want to make sure that the top is very clean, along with this front rail and this side frame member. And I can gently move this gantry by hand to clean some of these back areas as well. And the nice thing about this blue cloth is you can see where you start to pick up dust. And the very last thing that I'd like to check is going to be inside of this control panel. And again, this is where we want to make sure that the machine is completely unplugged. And mainly what I'm looking at here is if I haven't used the machine in a while, I just want to make sure that no little critters or bugs got in here and chewed on any wires or made any nests or anything like that. And everything looks good. There's no loose or frayed wires anywhere. Step 1 is complete. It was fast. It's easy to do. I recommend doing this about once every couple of days to a week, depending on how often you use your machine and what types of materials you're using in your machine. Moving on to step number 2 is changing the coolant water on the laser machine. This is super basic, super easy, but oftentimes overlooked. This water can become dirty and then it will start conducting electricity through that water jacket on the laser tube, and this is where we run into a lot of problems on the laser tube, including a very short lifespan of that laser tube. Changing the water route is good insurance on making sure that you have a long lifespan out of your laser tube. So to change the water route, I'm going to use 3 gallons of distilled water, and I'm going to show you the bucket of water that I have that's dirty right now. So here's my bucket of water. It's normally perched up right there so that this water return line is actually sitting in the water level. However, this is what dirty water looks like. It is slightly cloudy. Normally I would see down on top of that pump and it would be like crystal clear. Let me see if I can get rid of some of the glare. And we can see there's a slight haze in the water. The manufacturer recommends that this water is changed once a week, but I'll leave that up to you on when your water is actually dirty and needs to be changed out. And here's the bucket. I just emptied this out outside. I don't think I needed to show you that, but what I do want to show you is inside, maybe you can see it, there's this faint ring of the water line of the water that was in here. So even though the water looked relatively clean, Now that the water's been emptied out, I could tell there was definitely some foreign material in there that I definitely don't want in my laser tube. But now that this bucket is empty, I do want to take a fresh blue towel and wipe down and clean the inside of this bucket before adding my 3 gallons of fresh distilled water. There, that looks a lot better, but there's still a faint line of where the water level was in the bucket. And to clean that up, I'm just going to use some of that denatured alcohol on, again, one of these blue towels. And I can go in and use that towel to clean up everything. And this is looking fantastic. It's like a whole brand new bucket again. And the nice thing about using the denatured alcohol to clean anything that's left over by dry wiping that bucket is that alcohol will flash off in just a minute or two and it'll be ready for some new distilled water. This is the exciting part of putting new water into a bucket. Now this first gallon that I poured into the bucket, I'm going to hang on to this empty container because when I start the pump up, what I'm going to do is remove the water line that's draining back into this bucket, and I'm actually going to place it in this container, and I'm going to catch about the first quarter to half gallon. Because remember, we took dirty water out of the bucket, but that dirty water is still contained in all of the water lines and in the laser tube, and I want to make sure that I flush that out too. And I'm going to be using this to catch that. With the 3 gallons of water in my bucket reservoir underneath this table, I have that return line that normally goes into that bucket going into this empty container, and I'm ready to plug the pump back in. Okay, and with the pump plugged in, I'm pumping out all the water that was in the laser tube, and I'm going to just catch that here. I'm just going to let this run for about a minute. The pump that comes with the Monport 40-watt laser machine, it pumps about a half a gallon per minute. So this looks good. I'm going to move this underneath the table and plug this return line back into the bucket reservoir. Here's a quick view of the water reservoir with that distilled water changed out. And here we can see the top of the pump. We can see that very clearly now. Before we changed the water was a little bit cloudy, and we'll see if I can't get that as a side-by-side up on the screen for you. Changing out the coolant on the machine, it's quick, it's easy, it only costs a couple of dollars. Make sure that you use that distilled water and not purified water or filtered water. They're just not the same as distilled water. It's great insurance to make sure that you get a lot of life out of your laser tube. The last thing before moving on to the next step is my reservoir. I did purchase a cover that goes with that bucket. I like to put that cover loosely back over the top just to make sure that no dust or debris or anything falls into that bucket, and it also cuts down on evaporation. Each time I start up my machine when I come out to the workshop, I always first check that bucket of water to make sure I have several gallons in there to make sure that the machine is operating with enough water. With a fresh new towel and some denatured alcohol, I'm now going to clean the rails inside of the machine. I'm going to start out with this silver rail off to the side here. This one typically isn't that dirty because it's not in the path of any smoke while cutting or engraving. I get both sides. And again, I like to inspect the towel to see if there's any spots where it's getting dirty. And that way I know I'm actually cleaning something off of that rail. I found on my use that this upper rail is the one that gets the dirtiest. So this is the one that I clean last to make sure that I pick up all of the debris off of that rail. I clean the front side and of course the back side. I'll move the laser head and get the other side. Again, the front and the back. Now, this rail I do not lubricate because the wheels that they have on here are a plastic nylon type and do not require any lubrication. There's going to be 4 wheels, 2 in the front and then 2 in the back. And I just want to make sure that those look clean. If I see any discoloration on it, I can take my blue towel with that denatured alcohol and just run that along the wheel. And there I can see I picked up a little bit of debris. And I'll get this other wheel. I picked up just a little bit. And I'll get the back too. Now, the great thing about these nylon wheels on this coated metal gantry rail is that this system is not meant to be lubricated. If you put lubrication on here, all that smoke that comes up will collect on that lubrication and it will make this very fine paste and it will start polishing off this rail, accelerating the wear. All that's left to do inside the work area is re-lubricate this rail with that machine oil, that Hoppe's number 9. And for this, I have just a little corner of that blue rag, and I'm just going to put just a couple little dabs on there. You know the motto of this channel, just a dab will do. I'm going to move this back and forth, catching the bottom, the top, and the inside. Once I have that complete, I'll move the gantry forward and do the same thing, covering the top, the side, and the other side, and of course the very bottom. And I'll move that back and forth just a couple of times to make sure that there's no excessive oil. We want just a very, very light coating of oil on this rail. We don't want it dripping off of that rail. We just oiled up this rail, and as a part of this system going back and forth, there is a rail on this side. However, it's a different type of rail. It just rides on the sheet metal, and if I push this back, we can just see a little bit of that white wheel that rides on this rail. That's the same type of wheel that is found on the laser head that shuttles back and forth in this direction. There's a white wheel there, and there's one tucked underneath right next to the belt. And speaking of the belt, now's a good time just to kind of feel along that belt and make sure that it has even tension and to check if there's any cracks or pieces missing from that belt. That feels good. I'll move the gantry forward and I'll check the belt on the back side. And that all feels good. And along this rail, there's that belt that we just checked over here. There is one belt that is also underneath this frame member here. So I'll do the same thing. I'll move the gantry forward and I'll check that belt. And there's one last belt to check, and it's underneath this rail. So again, I'll just move this laser head to one end and I'll just feel underneath that it has even tension and that there's no rips, tears, or pieces missing from that belt. And that all feels good. And I'll move this to the other side and I'll check on this side of the belting. And that all feels good. Checking mirror alignment requires only 2 simple things. The first one being that blue painter's tape. We'll be putting this over the frame of the mirror and not actually on the mirror itself. We never want to touch the mirror itself, but the tape on the mirror frame is fair game. And because we are going to be having this front guard open, we do want to have our glasses on that come with the machine. I do hear quite often that, Greg, we can't see the laser beam, so it shouldn't be harmful, and that is incorrect. What you can't see can actually be harmful for you, and that includes this laser beam light and any scattered beams coming off of that. So please do practice safety when working around your machine. Let's jump in and take a look at checking the mirror alignment. To check the mirror alignment, we need to take a look at the control panel first, specifically this little display. There's a little turn dial on here. We want to turn that basically all the way down and then maybe to about the 9 o'clock position. And there's going to be this test fire button. And when we check the mirror alignment, I'll just be tapping that for about 1 second. And what we do is we turn this intensity dial up in the manual fire mode until we get the laser firing just enough to leave a mark on that blue painter's tape. The general idea when checking the mirror alignment is we're going to check the mirror alignment as close to the laser source so everything is backed up in that corner, and we will then pulse the laser with the blue painter's tape over the laser head, and then I'm going to move the mirrors as far away from the laser source as possible, and then we will check it again, and we want to make sure that the laser beam mark on that blue painter's tape lands in the same spot in this corner and in that starting corner. Before I actually start firing the laser, I do want to note that this test fire button does work with this top guard open. So please only operate the machine very carefully. I recommend running the machine and testing this with this closed. However, for the video so that you can see, I'll have my guard open. I'm going to start out by placing some blue tape over the laser module itself. And I'll push the laser module back over to the area closest to the laser tube once again. And with my safety glasses on, I'm now able to tap this test button and put a mark on that blue painter's tape. I've got one mark there. Now I'll move it to the opposite position, and I'll pulse that test button one more time. A nice close-up here will show that that laser beam landed right on top of the earlier laser beam. So in both positions, in the far position and the near position, the laser beam is exactly aligned, so there's nothing further to do here. If your laser beam is off, you'll need to go through a mirror alignment procedure, and I'll cover that in depth in another video because that gets into it. There's no shortcuts that you can really take with that other than methodically going through and making sure that you have perfect results at the end of your mirror alignment. This one looks good, and we're ready to go on to the mirror cleaning. Checking the mirror alignment, it doesn't take that long, and I typically only do this if I haven't used the machine in quite a while, or if I see a change in how the machine is responding to materials in the workbed area, such as it was working well and now it's not. Sometimes something can shift around on the mirrors. But next up is the mirror cleaning, and this is something that I do quite often. Particularly because my machine, I currently do not have an air assist kit on it, and my main focusing lens, I find that that gets dirty quite often. If I'm out here doing multiple projects in one day, I'll end up removing and cleaning that lens several times a day. So I'm really looking forward to the air assist kit coming for this machine. I'll be doing a video on that shortly, but for now, I just monitor how clean or dirty that lens is. But without further ado, let's move on to cleaning the mirrors. Now, the mirrors on this machine, typically the closer you are to the laser head, the dirtier they are. So that laser module that shuttles back and forth, that mirror is typically the one that gets most dirty, followed by the one that's on the side, and the one that stays the cleanest is the one in this back compartment where the laser tube is located. Now, this is actually the most critical part that you can easily damage on the machine, is incorrectly cleaning the mirrors. And this is probably going to spark a lot of debate in the comments down below, which if you use a different method, I'd welcome you to comment down below on what you use. But I did research on what the manufacturer recommends, along with searching out different forums from people that work professionally with much larger laser systems, that the mirror cleanliness is very critical. But for our video today, we're going to reference, we're going to pretend this is isopropyl alcohol, or if you have severely dirtied lenses and mirrors, acetone. And again, I like using this tissue paper for camera lenses because it has a nice structure. It doesn't dissolve when it's wet, and it doesn't leave any lint particles behind. Now, as I mentioned in the very beginning of the video, I do recommend getting one of these little camera lens kits that has this little air bulb in it to blow any initial dust off, followed up by this little lipstick tube brush to brush any debris off. I'd recommend using these two methods first if you're doing anything like stonework where you have just a lot of dust but no residue. If you work a lot with wood, you'll find that that smoke residue will not brush off and it will not blow off with that little air bulb. And we do need to mechanically remove it by using a cleaner and a tissue paper. Now, the most important step in this is not to touch the lenses or the mirrors with your bare hands. So for that, I'm going to put on these blue nitrile gloves. Now, once I have the blue gloves on, I'm actually going to wash these gloves because I handled these gloves with my bare hands and I may have gotten hand oils on it. Now I'm going to be touching mirrors on the machine. So I'll actually be using the eyedropper, and I'm going to draw up a little bit of this alcohol and apply it to one of these lens cleaning cloths. And I'm going to wash my hands with the gloves on to make sure that the gloves I have on are clean. And again, I like to use a fresh pair of gloves each time. So if you have a bicycle that you work on and they're all full of chain grease and stuff, don't use those gloves for this step. I can set that off to the side. And now that the gloves are clean, there's no rubbing the face or scratching your butt or your armpits or anything. These now only touch the machine that we've already wiped down and already cleaned. See, there is a method to the madness here. These gloves, we just want to touch the mirrors, and everything that we know is already clean. As a part of this step, I will be removing the lens that's on the laser module itself, and for that, I will need a screwdriver. So even the screwdriver, I've already cleaned this, I'm just demonstrating it now, that when I wash the gloves down, I also make sure that I wash this tool down. There's no sense in cleaning the gloves and then picking up a dirty tool and then handling the lens afterwards. So the key here is cleanliness, cleanliness, cleanliness. This first method of cleaning, I call this just the surface cleaning or the light cleaning of the mirrors. For this, I leave the mirror number 1 and mirror number 2 in the machine yet, only removing mirror number 3 because I can't easily reach it from external, so I do have to remove that one. I start out by grabbing a fresh, clean lens tissue and a cleaner of choice. Again, either that isopropyl alcohol to start with, and then if you do have stubborn smoke stains on your mirrors, moving on to the acetone. And all I need is just a drop or two to go onto this tissue paper, and I can go and clean that second mirror right here. And I'm going to move to a different part of that tissue paper to get any haze left over. And when I inspect that mirror, I want to see that mirror like, wow, that's the cleanest I've ever seen it. It's as clean as when I first got the machine. That's how clean these mirrors need to be. Remember, the whole idea of the mirrors is to reflect all of the laser energy off of it. Once that mirror starts getting scratched and it starts absorbing energy, that mirror starts to heat up and it accelerates the wear and scratches on that mirror, and they degrade very, very quickly. It has almost, I call it an avalanche failure of the mirror. It starts out as a little scratch and it progressively gets worse and worse. So like each time you look at it, it will look twice as worse as the last time you looked at it. But mirror number 2 is cleaned. I'm going to open the hatch on the back here and clean mirror number 1. And that's nice and clean, and there's no haze on that mirror. For mirror number 3, I'll be removing this mirror and I'll show you my method that I use for this. Just a couple turns of the screwdriver allows this bar to pivot out of the way, and I can easily pluck the mirror out of the holder. We'll see that I've got the addition of a picture frame off to the side, and what I'm interested about this picture is the flat piece of glass on the top. So I'm going to place this with the mirror side up, and I'm going to grab a new piece of this lens tissue paper. I'm going to place that flat on the glass. Now with my cleaning solution, I'm going to put a couple of drops on the tissue paper, and on this old piece of tissue paper, I'm going to just put a couple drops across to see if any of those dust particles or residue drips right off. And I'm going to turn the mirror so it's face down. I'm going to place it on top of the wet cleaner, and I'm going to slide it over to the dry area of the paper. And I can do that as many times as I need. I'll let that lens re-wet itself, and then just gently slide it from the wet to the dry side. And this is a method that works very well, particularly if you're using acetone. Acetone has a tendency of leaving a haze behind, and again, we can't have any haze or anything foreign other than a perfect reflection off of this mirror. Everything looks good on that mirror, and I'm ready to reinstall it. It really was just that easy. And as much as I can, I'm handling this mirror just by the outside edge. I'm ready to tighten that down. Again, that screw just needs to be snugged up a little bit. It doesn't need to be over superly tight where it would risk cracking that lens. Now, this is the part of the machine that I think I end up cleaning the most because I do not have air assist installed on here, and that is the main focusing lens on the end of this module. And one of the really easy things to do when removing this lens is forgetting which side of the lens faces up. And there's two types of lenses, and both versions of lenses will have a curved top, and we always want the curved domed top to face upwards. So let me demonstrate that. So if this is the lens, we want that curved side to face up. And my lens here, because it's a starter lens, it is flat on the bottom side, so that's a good way to double check that. There are higher quality lenses that have a dome on the top and then a slightly different dome on the bottom, so the whole thing is kind of arced. And now that we know which side of the lens is going to face up, when we reinstall it back into the machine, I can just loosey-goosey dump that out. Hanging onto the lens by the sides, I can take my cleaning solution and just kind of drizzle that across the top. That'll do kind of a couple things for us here. First of all, anything that was super loose and not really adhered to the surface of that lens will wash right off. And secondly, if there is smoke residue on the lens, particularly the flat side on the bottom, that will begin to loosen that up. For the first step here, I'm going to put cleaning solution down on that flat tissue and place the lens on top, and again, scoot that right off to the side until I know that it's dry. And I know that it's dry underneath the lens because I don't see this long trail of the wet cleaning solution. And now for the other side of the lens, just a little dab on this tissue, and I'm going to wipe down the top surface. And I'm wiping this top surface that is domed up, of course, because it's not going to lay flat on the tissue paper. Now, if you have a higher quality lens in your machine that's domed on the top and domed on the bottom, I would suggest saturating this tissue paper with your cleaning solution and then pinching top and bottom and kind of just give that a soft, gentle little wash. Without the tissue in my hand, it looks something like that. And I'm going to do that with the dry tissue paper to make sure that I'm not leaving a haze behind. And again, when I look at this with the reflection of the light, and you may not be able to detect that on the camera in this video, but when I see those surfaces, I don't see any laser etching near the center or off to the sides. And when I look at that lens, I look, wow, this is the cleanest I've ever seen it, as clean as when it was new. That's really how clean these need to be. And I'm going to set this down on a clean part of the tissue paper, and I'm going to inspect the lens holder. Now, mine I've already cleaned up a little bit from when I first received the machine, but there was some machining material and oils that were inside of this cover. So what I did is I took some tissue paper, again, anything that will not leave lint behind, and I cleaned out the inside of that, particularly on this little inside track where the lens itself rides. I want to make sure that that's free from anything that will misalign that lens. Now's a good time to also clean the outside of this cover, along with the sides that we're touching. And I can see that I picked up a little bit of yellowing off of here. And so I'm going to resaturate this tissue, and I'm going to wash my gloves from touching this dirty piece of tissue. So now the gloves are clean again. I'll let these gloves dry off so I don't put a haze on that lens we just cleaned. And I'm going to pick the lens up by the sides as best I can with these rubber gloves. And I'm going to look for what is the flat side right here. And I'm going to place that facing down, and that did flip over, so I've got to try that again. And I'm going to shimmy that around until that lens falls perfectly into the center. There's a little shelf or ledge for that lens to fit into, and this is ready to be reinstalled back into the machine. And sometimes I find this difficult to try and screw this cover back in. So what I like to do is turn the cover in the direction that I would be unscrewing it until I feel it kind of click or pop. And that way I know that it's aligned, and now I can start turning it in the direction for it to screw back in. This way I don't misalign the threads when reinstalling this cover. One of the questions that you might be thinking to yourself, and it's something that I oftentimes ask myself, is do I check the mirror alignment first with that blue painter's tape and then clean the mirrors and the lens, or do I do that in reverse order? And I think it's kind of one of those, what came first, the chicken or the egg? Which one should you do first? And I think that's really up to you. Me personally, as you saw, when I checked the alignment, when I burned a hole through this tape, it did let off a little bit of smoke. Most of that smoke comes off that front surface and goes up. But on this third mirror, some of that smoke will go inside of this mirror cavity, and it may leave a smoke film on that mirror. That's why it's my preference to check the alignment first. If everything looks good there, then I like to clean the mirrors with only removing this third mirror and of course removing the focusing lens. The last method of cleaning the mirrors is what I call a deep cleaning, and that's when I would be removing the first or the second mirror from the holder itself. When I'm doing that method, because I'm handling the mirror holder so much, I like to clean those mirrors, actually all of the mirrors and the lenses, and then I'll go back and I'll do the quick alignment check just to make sure I didn't throw anything out of whack. For this part of the video, I'm going to be showing mirror number 2 because it's the easiest one to show you. The same thing would be for mirror number 1. It's just that it's really hard to get a camera angle in there to see what I'm doing so that you can see at home how it all works. And I'm going to start by unscrewing this frame that holds that mirror in place. And to do that, I like to place a finger on the lens itself to hold it in place while I'm unscrewing the holder. And again, I never want to touch directly the center of the lens. Even with the clean gloves, I trust this lens tissue paper more So I'm going to place that over the mirror, and then my finger can go on the center of that lens, and now I can unscrew that lens, that mirror holder. I'm going to place the tissue paper underneath that mirror just in case it falls off of the holder. And I was able to grab that and hold on to it by the edges. I know some of this might be a repeat, but some viewers do like to skip ahead in the video and they're more interested in deep cleaning or removing the lenses off their machine than cleaning the lens while it's in the machine. So to start out with, I like to take an older used piece of tissue and my favorite cleaning compound in this disposable eyedropper, and I like to just shower this top surface with that cleaning solution. Shake off any excess, and again, that will take any loose particles on the surface and wash it off the mirror so I don't have to scrub it into the mirror. And the second part is if there's any smoke residue on the material that does need to be mechanically removed, this will help soften that up. Next, I can go over to this fresh piece of tissue paper on the table, and I can blot out a nice wet area. And I'll put the mirror face down, and I can move that around slightly. And then I will quickly move it off to the side to a dry area, again, making sure that I don't leave a wet streak trail behind it. That way I know that this mirror, when I pick it up, the mirror itself is dry and there's no haze left on it. The mirror will reinstall just the way that it came out. I'm going to take the finger that I'd like to be pressing on the mirror itself, and I'm going to put a clean sheet of that lens tissue paper over that finger, and then I'm going to place the mirror holder over the top. So I've got kind of this like a little crown, if you will, with this tissue paper finger poking through. I'm going to take the lens, again, holding it by the very outside edges, and place that into the holder. And I'm using that tissue paper finger to make sure that the lens is in its little nook on the holder. And then I'm going to pull that retaining ring off of the finger onto the holder. And just like the focusing lens, I can turn that retaining ring in the direction of unscrewing it until I kind of feel it pop and click, and that'll tell me that the threads will be aligned correctly. And then I can start turning it in the direction to screw that retainer ring back on. And there, a perfectly clean mirror is back installed on the machine. These videos that I make on like this Monport 40-watt CO2 laser, these types of videos that I make really brings me a lot of joy. If this video helped you out in learning how to take care of your machine to keep it up and running like new, please consider liking this video, subscribing to the channel, or ringing that notification bell. And doing any number of those things really helps this channel out, and it connects content like this with great viewers like you. For those of you who have watched my other videos, you know that we're just about done, so this is the sad part where I need to say goodbye, but until next time, learn, create, and share.